So, Joyce DiDonato, you know, we're only a couple of months into the year, but I have to say this new album is definitely far and beyond my favorite of everything that I've heard so far.
I love it. Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful. The title of the CD, of the album, is Songplay, and that sort of just tells you everything that you need to know. Well, it doesn't tell you everything you need to know, but it gives you a clue as to what it's all about. You've taken these old Italian art songs, you know, that all classical voice students know from their school days, and you've completely refreshed them through a different lens, different musical genres that you've added to them. I mean, when you listen to the first song, you know, Sei Tu Mami, and all of a sudden it gets kind of like a bossa nova. I mean, you know that, you know, you're not on the narrow path there, right? There's something going on.
Yeah.
So give us a sense of you know, what the album is.
Well, it's actually exactly what you describe. And at the end of the day, it's a celebration of what makes a great song and the joy of making a song your own. The pianist Craig Terry came to me with this idea about 5 years ago, I guess. And both of us know so well that beginning vocal student hell of trying to open up this book of 24 Italian art songs and trying to make a decent sound with them. They're deceptively simple on the page, but they really are masterful pieces in teaching you how to learn how to sing in a classical way. But they're fiendishly difficult, and we never sing them well at the start, and we end up hating them. And so Craig said, you know, Joyce, it's kind of a pity because these are still great songs. And he said, I have an idea. And he started to play Caro Mio Ben for me. And it started out quite innocently and simple, and then all of a sudden it bended a little bit, and it sort of went into this other world of jazz. And I was singing with him, and my voice followed him really effortlessly, and we were both looking at each other like, what is happening? And we were literally playing with the song. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and it just felt right. And so the idea was to come and highlight how beautiful these pieces are, to supplement them side by side with parallel songs from the American Songbook that in many ways are the same song, just separated by centuries. You know, you've got Tu lo sai, which is this plangent yearning for love that sits right next to Duke Ellington's Solitude. And you know that you're in the same emotional world and the same sense of longing. And we've thrown it together to celebrate, you know, the great timeless love song that we've been inundating ourselves with for centuries.
Yeah, what is your background as far as, I mean, everybody knows you as an opera star, but, you know, have you ventured into other genres, or did you grow up with some of this music?
I grew up with this music for sure. You know, I grew up in a very musical household, so there was musicals upstairs on my sister's record player. Downstairs was hard rock with my brother in the basement. And, you know, there was classical music coming from my dad's office and on our family piano. But Sunday nights was Glenn Miller night. And it's the night that my dad had the whole, was it a Reader's Digest collection or something? But he had, you know, the encyclopedia of the Glenn Miller. And we always ended with Tuxedo Junction and all of that. Plus, I'm from Kansas City, so this element of jazz was around me all the time. Yeah. I never studied. I never called myself a jazz singer or, you know, it was never my aspiration. But it's definitely been a part of my musical culture and musical fabric. And I'm definitely the girl who sings in the shower along to Billy and Ella and Sarah and Diana, all those amazing women.
Yeah, but your jazz chops are now wide out there in the open for everybody to hear.
Woo.
And what I sense like a kind of a kinship between the sort of opera roles that you sing with all the fioritura and all the kind of digging in and, you know, a lot of vocal fireworks. that's in jazz too, and I see you kind of blurring the lines between the two in some of these pieces.
Well, thank you. This is really kind of the why it felt like I could give myself permission to do this. Because it is the sense of improvisation that it's demanded in Baroque music and bel canto music, as well as in the jazz world. Those, the great maestros that I've worked with, William Christie and Alan Curtis and John Elliott Gardner, that I've done a lot of this music with, they've all likened this to jazz along the way, where the instrumentalists as well as the vocalists are expected to fill in and improvise and play along the way. Harpsichord, that's all a harpsichord does, is it's improvising and working from a basic chord structure. So in a way, this was the most organic of fits to sort of fuse these two worlds together. I don't feel like I'm crossing over. I feel like I'm fusing my vocal world with and the Baroque world with the jazz world and vice versa.
Yeah, and I love the way that many of these arrangements kind of begin rather straight-laced, and then they, go off on a tangent. I'm thinking specifically of, I think it's the aria from Arsilda, that Antonio Vivaldi piece. And about 3 minutes in, all heck breaks loose, and it's just a free-for-all.
It is.
And it's wonderful, the abandon that you give to that you're able to do that vocally, that you have the technique or the, wherewithal to be able to give it to that. I mean, it's just remarkable.
Well,
really.
Thank you. Well, that's the joy of it, too, because, I also, I believe very much in the tradition and the style of opera and what I do, and I've been doing that for 20 years with a lot of consciousness and a lot of good intention. But at some point also, I have this irrepressible desire to play, and this idea, I want to challenge in particular the classical audience to let themselves be surprised. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a lot to surprise a classical listener, and there's a beauty in that because we know what we love, and when we first encounter the Mahler symphony with our favorite conductor, that is the reference, and we live in that and we revel it, and it's wonderful. But I sometimes lament the fact that also when we attach so closely to one performer or one iconic record, we close down our listening a little bit, and it's we're unfairly comparing a live performance or something new against these ghosts of the past. I understand it, but it makes me sad. And so this idea of being able to surprise the listener is something that I challenge myself with a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was curious what kind of an audience you were going for here. You're taking the show on the road, obviously. I mean, have you seen, I know you've done, a couple of concerts so far, right?
Yeah, Seattle and San Francisco.
What kind of audiences have you seen showing up to hear this music? Is it your traditional kind of opera audience? Or?
For the moment, because this first run of recitals, we are on classical series. The Cal performances in Berkeley, and we'll be going to Princeton, and we'll be at this will be different. We'll be at the Appel Room in New York City as part of the American Songbook series at Lincoln Center. And that will be streamed on Medici TV, which is very exciting. My goal is to get a lot of young people in. It's this whole project is really dedicated to that beginning voice student and all the people who have been a beginning voice student, because that's a kind of fraternity that is very bonding. But, I would love for it also to go into jazz festivals and any other kind of venue that is open to exploring, because it's not particularly jazz, it's not particularly classical. We've found something that is a fusion of those two things. But ultimately, it's really for people who love a great song. That's, I think, the bottom line.
Lullaby of birdland, that's what I
sigh. Never in my woodland could there be ways to reveal in a phrase how I feel.
It's so much fun to listen to, and I imagine it must be fun to perform it for a traditional classical audience and to sort of see their eyes get wider as you as you morph into these other genres. I mean, is that the experience for you so far?
Absolutely. But because also my impression is that classical music lovers also have a very good understanding of jazz and an appreciation of the high musicianship of these players.
Yeah.
So when you hear a trumpet player or a bass player that are legends in their own genre and they go to town, it doesn't matter if it's jazz or classical or country, you marvel at the level of musicianship. And it ends up being just a really joyful evening and a sometimes poignant evening. And so the people, I really want them to leave the theater smiling and humming a tune. That doesn't always happen in opera. My last project was around War and Peace, and it was a very immersive and challenging, deep production for people, and I wanted them to go home in a state of kind of pondering and reflection. And this, I want them tapping their toes and dancing out onto the street. And I think we're finding that.
And I can't blame you for wanting to have a little fun after War and Peace.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah,
that's important. Yeah, this is, I guess, sort of the Busby Berkeley musical of my career.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the other musicians that are featured on this recording with you?
The first musician we brought on board was the legendary Chuck Israels, and he's our bass player, and he was a member of the Bill Evans Trio in the glory years, and has played with Billie Holiday and Chet Baker and John Coltrane, and I mean it's a who's who list of the greatest jazz musicians ever. And knowing that bass player is sort of the fundamental of a jazz ensemble, we started with him, and then he brought on board Jimmy Madison, our astonishing, just life-affirming drum player who is just, I can really say this with all authority, the coolest cat. He's just great. And also our trumpet player, Charlie Porter, who's much younger, but he studied at Juilliard, and his teacher was Wynton Marsalis. And so he has a foot both in the classical and the jazz world, and that was really important for me, that also the instrumentalists could fuse through and seamlessly cross these different genres, and Charlie does that really brilliantly. And then we threw in a tango at the last minute, and so we found this extraordinarily bandoneon players, extraordinarily talented, from Buenos Aires, Lautaro Greco, and he adds just this deep element of humanity to the project with his gorgeous instrument.
I can't let you go without just asking you quickly about what is going on at the end of the album with Caro Mio Ben. It sounds like you're kind of recreating that experience, of the student and their 24 Italian art songs. I mean, can you just tell us what that's about?
It's that tribute to all the beginning voice students out there, and going back to my day of where we had to audition on cassette tape and tape our recordings or auditions on cassette tape and listen to yourself back on the big boombox. And it was just that trepidatious, you can't, your heart and your soul are singing like Callas, but what's actually coming out of your throat is just painfully terrible, and you have to sort of live with that and somehow bravely show up at your next voice lesson and hope that you get a little bit better. And I really did that just as an idea to encourage all those people to hang in there. We've all been there, all of us, even Renee Fleming and myself, and maybe not Cecilia Bartoli, I don't know, but most of us have been there where we just are terrible at the start. And I don't want them to give up on their love for music.
Yeah. I love the little pep talk you give at the very end.
Yeah.
I hope you do that on tour when you take it to Oberlin. Actually, you're going to be there on the 27th of February.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to being there.
That's wonderful. Well, Joyce DiDonato, the album is called Songplay. Just fantastic music on here. Really enjoyed listening to this. Thanks for joining us here on FM 91.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's for all you freshman voice majors out there. winner. You can do it. Play with that song.